Fighting your emotions doesn't work. But how do we befriend our emotions instead? There are many ways to develop a skill of befriending our emotions, but they all start with one fundamental understanding about emotions. I'll introduce you to that understanding and new insight in this video. Hi, I'm Katja Cahoon, psychotherapist and yoga teacher. There are many ways to befriend our emotions without fighting them, and they all start with this one fundamental understanding about emotions. It's really a shift, a paradigm shift in how we view emotions. I'll introduce you to it, I'll give you some tools and skills, and illustrate through some stories of clients that I'm working with. So chances are you, like many people, are labeling emotions as either negative or positive. So anger, sadness, disappointment, disgust are labeled as negative, and we usually defend against those, right? We try to push them away or numb or distract ourselves from those emotions, and we don't want to feel them. And then the positive ones are things like joy, happiness, excitement, gratitude, and anything else that feels pleasant. And with those, we try to grasp them and bring them closer and have more of them in our lives. As soon as you label an emotion as negative, you are actually fighting it. You're resisting it because part of you is saying, this isn't okay. I shouldn't feel this way. This is bad to feel. And the thing is that we can't fight our emotions. Fighting our emotions is a little bit like hitting our head against the wall trying to cure a headache. It really doesn't work. So it creates that resistance physically, mentally, even emotionally, and it's actually quite exhausting. Constantly fighting our emotions is very, very exhausting. So as the great psychiatrist Carl Jung says, what we resist persists. So let me illustrate that through a silly little example. I want you right now to not think of a pink elephant. Absolutely, under no circumstances, think of a pink elephant. Do not think of elephants. Do not think of the color pink in any way, shape, or form. So while this is a little bit silly, chances are, yeah, you did think of an elephant and probably the color pink as well. So that's a little bit how it works when we resist our emotions. We tell ourselves, do not feel this. I shouldn't feel this. We try to push it away. And immediately we have that resistance. So there is a much, much more helpful view on emotions that, as I said, unlocks so many tools and skills, and in and of itself already makes a big difference. We have to understand that all emotion is adaptive. All emotion is there for a reason. We have all our emotions from birth on, and they all serve a signaling or communication function. And that's really one big purpose of emotion. But wait, you'll say, I mean, fear and sadness and anger, they suck. They're unpleasant. And this is the key. We can categorize emotions as pleasant and unpleasant and look at their intensity. So this comes from the great work of Lisa Feldman-Barré. Here's her amazing book that I highly recommend. It is also something that has been taught in Buddhism for a long, long time. Jack Kornfield, in his beautiful book, The Wise Heart, outlines that as well. So when we look at emotions that way, it really changes our perspective and our ability to befriend and work with those emotions. So for example, in this view, anger is mostly unpleasant. And then it ranges in intensity from very mild, when I'm a little irritated by something, a little annoyed, to very intense in the case of being livid, right? What a great word. And this is really important because it gives us a greater range. There's a beautiful website that illustrates this range a little bit more for the 5 basic emotions. So I highly recommend looking at that because often we also lack the vocabulary, right? Everything's anger or everything's fear versus, oh, I'm a little nervous and I'm terrified, right? There's a whole big range. So the same goes for the pleasant emotions, right? We can have a whole range. Joy is pleasant, but maybe not super intense, versus exuberance is maybe very, very intense and also quite pleasant. So now you're gaining this much more differentiated view on emotions and a more positive view. So this leads to not fighting or ignoring them, which opens up the ability to actually get the message that the emotion might convey. Let's take anger, for example. It's an emotion many of us have difficulties with, especially women are often conditioned to not feel anger. Good girls don't get angry, be nice, all of that. So it often leads to suppressing anger and thereby missing the signaling function of anger. So I was working with a client who really had ingrained this in childhood, not to feel anger and not to be in touch with anger, and that anger isn't okay. And consequently, she felt that her boundaries were violated a lot. And that is actually one of the functions of anger. It signals when there is an obstacle in our way, that our boundaries are being violated, or that we are in danger. And it can mobilize incredible energy through that way, so we can defend ourselves or fight back. Now, in modern life, we're not often in the situation where we're physically attacked, although it does happen. But there might be a verbal attack, or there might be boundary transgressions in other ways at work. Now, we certainly have had enough stories of that. So we worked on normalizing anger for her and realizing that it has a signaling function, that it has a communication function. So she got more in touch with her anger in her body and just labeling it from, I'm a little irritated to, oh, I'm really, really angry about this. And that opened her up to speak up more and to act more assertively at work. So she got in touch with that and she realized, oh, hey, this doesn't feel good. This isn't all right. Okay, I need to say something. I need to speak up. I need to set a boundary. And she really wasn't able to do that very well because she had completely disconnected from the signaling function of that emotion through all the negative messages she had about that emotion. So if we look at fear, for example, without fear, we might all be dead. We might have walked in front of a car, or we might have touched something we shouldn't have, or eaten something we shouldn't have, right? So fear really serves a protective function in that way as well. And is it always negative? Think about a roller coaster or a scary movie. We choose to go through these experiences and have that visceral experience of fear. Is it negative? Is it even unpleasant? And you can answer that for yourself. The difference here is that when we do that, we're in control. Very often when these negative emotions labels arise is because we're not in control. Something scares us, something angers us, and we're not in control of the situation. So we're being reactive to it rather than befriending that emotion. And then with that reactiveness comes the negative labeling. If instead, again, we go back to, okay, this is unpleasant, I'm feeling this, and what is this telling me? So you can ask yourself that question, what is this telling me? What do I need to do? What action do I need to take based on that emotion? Going back to fear, so I was working with a client who had a lot of presentation anxiety. So, all the symptoms of fear and anxiety, the heart rate, the breathing, butterflies in the stomach. So what we worked on is actually a cool thing. It's the benefit of fear and excitement being very, very similar to each other physiologically speaking, right? Heart rate's up, there's usually movement in your body unless there is paralysis when the fear is very high. Breathing is up and, so we can harness that. And the question he asked himself is, how can I make my butterflies fly in formation? And what he realized is that even though he was anxious about the public speaking, he was very committed to his work. And he really felt it was very important to convey that work to other people. So that focus on meaning, on the excitement of speaking to a broader audience and bringing his topic to that audience really gave him a sense of meaning and helped him to shift those butterflies a little bit more into a formation flight so he could harness that energy of fear again. Right? Again, if you think about fight or flight, anger, the fight, fear, the flight, there's incredible energy in there. And if you can harness that, now with the excitement, he was able to do great presentations and feel less fear, less unpleasantness, and more pleasantness. And this isn't a quick fix, right? This took him some work, but it was absolutely possible. So this is really the important question to ask. What is this emotion telling me? Because that way you don't miss out on the signaling function of that emotion. If you think about grief as an example, grief helps us reformat the mental maps or the mental models in our mind without that person or pet or situation present. We need that going inward that comes with grief to do that work. Disgust protects us, right? Otherwise we would all be eating or doing things that would not be so good for us. So you can see they're not negative, these emotions. They serve a function. Yes, they're unpleasant, sometimes very much so, and sometimes a little bit less. So that's really the big insight or the big understanding, is that you shift your perspective from negative positive to pleasant unpleasant, and then look at the intensity. And that already is helpful because you're creating a little bit of distance, and then ask yourself, okay, what is this telling me? What do I need to learn from this? What action do I need to take? And that also differentiates us from feeling an emotion and being reactive to it to taking action that's positive and empowering. So we often think anger is negative because people act out on it. It doesn't have to be that way. Anger just is. What we do with it matters. And that starts with having a more empowered view on it, and then asking yourself what to do with it.